What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest installment of the Detroit News Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor. And as always, I'm your host, Pistons beat writer at the Detroit News, Coty M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on all your social media platforms at Coty Davis _24. Once again, it's Coty COTY DAVIS _24. And of course, I'm here with my co-host Tarohn. What's going on, my brother?
What's going on, Coty? And make sure you guys follow me on all social media platforms at Tarohn Finley, TAROHN FINLEY. And as always, I'm ready to talk Pistons.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, we did not get a show out last week due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Tarohn, I hope you had a very good Thanksgiving. My Thanksgiving was different because I was actually on the road, finishing up that 4-game road trip. However, even though they did in that road trip with a loss against the Boston Celtics, this is a team that literally just finished winning 13 games in a row, which was a franchise record. And before later on in the show, we're gonna talk about the biggest issue that's surrounding this team as of right now. And Tarohn, during this 4-game road trip, we actually saw the return of Jaden Ivey. But before we get into all that, the Detroit Pistons tied a franchise record, 13 consecutive wins, which, by the way, as a guy who grew up loving this game, loving this league, of course, the Pistons always been one of the premier teams in this league. I always thought that they had a winning streak longer than 13. They had an opportunity to tie it, the 1990 Pistons and the '04 Pistons, were the other two teams that literally won 13 games in a row. And, for me, at least, I thought that winning streak would have been a lot longer, but it seemed like they just had multiple 8 to 10 game winning streak. But Tarohn, really quick, what are your thoughts, about the Pistons, what they were able to accomplish this early in the season so far?
Yeah, I'm impressed. I know they didn't, break the winning streak record or anything like that, but just tying it was very impressive to me. They're still the first team in the East at 17-4. And I just think that their November record, and they're actually also getting recognized for this. They just had Cade, win Player of the Month, JB win Coach of the Month. So I think that it's very impressive, and it just shows what high standards they have for this season.
And I love that you mentioned that, talking about the high standard, because look, a lot of people, and including myself, to a certain degree, because look, I love history and I would love to be a part of history. I wanted to see this team break the winning streak record. However, when they did lose against the Boston Celtics, that ended their winning streak, I would say that you can tell that this team definitely has their eyes set on a greater goal. And that greater goal is literally not only just representing the Eastern Conference in the finals, but potentially winning the Larry O'Brien trophy. And look, I think we are getting to a point. Look, we are a quarter done with the season, and I think we are really starting to get to the point where you have to say the Detroit Pistons are legitimate contenders in the Eastern Conference. Because Tarohn, as you just mentioned, as of right now, we're approaching the quarter mark of the season. They are 17-4 in the Eastern Conference at the time. They are 17-4, number one in the Eastern Conference at the time of this recording. They will take on the Milwaukee Bucks, and look, they did beat the Milwaukee Bucks during that 13-game win streak. However, that game was played without Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis is back in the lineup tonight. And look, things could definitely change when you add Giannis to a lineup for the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, look, the question is whether or not how long is he going to be in that lineup. That's another question, another topic for another day. But overall, man, my biggest takeaway from the 13-game winning streak, not only did the Pistons solidify themselves as a championship contender, I was just happy for guys like Cade, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey to a certain extent, even though, he made his debut towards the back half of that winning streak. Marcus Sasser, even though he hasn't played, guys like Asar Thompson. I was just so happy for those guys, because those were the guys that was the core that endured that 28-game losing streak. And you can tell every time you talk to one of these guys, and, it's our job to bring it up, especially considering when they tied the franchise record for 13, it was the 2-year anniversary when they lost 13 consecutive games in the same building against the Indiana Pacers. And you can tell that those guys really, they put the losing streak behind them, but you can tell it still motivate them to this day. And just to see, the excitement those guys had to be like, look, I know we are a part of one terrible streak in franchise history, but it also, you know, it gave them a sense of validation, growth, maturity, and show how far this franchise have come, knowing that they are now a part of a good version of a winning streak.
Uh, yeah, I feel like for me personally, I take it like a game at a time. I worry about it like that. I try to think of bigger picture. Want to take us as far as we can. But it is crazy to think back when we were 2-14 that we get 14 wins and what we have
15 now.
But we can get 14 in a row.
That was a sorry Thompson, just reflecting on a 13-year winning streak. But overall, man, I truly do believe that this team is a contender because during that 13-game winning streak, they won majority of those games with a number of their core players out. And now we are starting to see them get healthy. Tarohn, finally, Jaden Ivey is back in the lineup. Before I give my take on Ivy, I know it's only been 6 games. And yes, there are moments, there are times where we are thinking to ourselves, okay, he's still knocking off some rust, and rightfully so. This man has literally almost missed a full calendar year of basketball. But Tarohn, 6 games in, what have been your thoughts about Jaden Ivey so far?
Yeah, I think there's, some rust, and that's like he hasn't played in a long time. So I think that's to be expected. Right now, he's, like you said, only played in 6 games, averaging 6.8 points, 1.7 assists. And, he's coming off the bench. They didn't throw him into the fire right away like they have been doing with, other players coming off injuries. Like I remember Sar, when he first went down, they were bringing him off the bench for a little bit before back into the starting lineup. So, and then he's also at 38%. So there's a lot to, this is kind of be expected, like I said, with him missing such a long time. But I honestly think there's flashes of that old Jaden Ivey, especially those first 2 games. He scored in double figures and had his acrobatic layups and things like that. So I think he's really just trying to find a way to fit in with this team. We always talk about how this is a team that's team first. Like they're not individual based. So I think that just the fact that he's willing to come off the bench, he's willing to kind of fit in rather than just try to find his own identity rather than the team's identity. I think that's what's impressed me the most, is that his unselfishness and that he's just trying to fit in with a team that's already had so much success when he was away.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I had an opportunity to talk to him in Miami after the game, and just asked him because the game in Miami marked his 5th game being back, and I wrote the story on Detroit News website, and that's basically the number one thing that he was telling me. He was like, look, yes, I'm still trying to find my way, get back to the player that I was prior to the knee injury, the leg injury. However, he did say that he is all he wants to do is help this team win and fit in where what this team has already built and has already established. And I like that because it not only shows the growth and maturity in him, but it's also showing that, he understands that it's basically going to take him the rest of this season to get back to the player that he was. However, he's going to do everything possible to make sure that he continues to keep this team on the upward trajectory that they have been on. Once again, this is a team that, we might as well just call it. They are contenders in the Eastern Conference as of right now. If they make it, they are expected to go to the second round. Some people are expecting them to go at least to the Eastern Conference Finals. And given the way the East look, given how the Pistons has looked as of right now, it's realistic for this organization. And when you look at someone like Jaden Ivey, you're looking at somebody that he definitely adds another dynamic to this team. And it's not just me that's saying it. Rick Carlisle had also mentioned it as well. He was like, look, with Jaden Ivey coming back, that's nothing but another weapon that the Pistons would be able to utilize. And to be realistic with you, Tarohn, I kind of like the fact that they are bringing him off the bench. Now, look, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want your honest opinion here. But let's say Ivy starts to find his rhythm come February or March or whatever. We know, realistically, if we put together the list of the top 5 players, what the starting lineup should look like, Ivy is right there starting next to Cade. But given how well this team has already started, given the continuity, given the chemistry that's already with that starting five, given the fact that the Pistons have one of the most productive bench units in the league, you bring in someone like Jaden Ivey. You just mentioned it. He already had a couple games where he scored in double figures. There are a couple games I want to highlight that showcase, how important Jaden Ivey will be to this team, whether he starts or not. But Tarohn, at some point, would you like to see Jaden Ivey inserted back into the starting lineup, or would you like to see him continue to go the rest of the season coming off the bench and just adding another weapon that this team can use for their reserve unit?
That's crazy you mentioned that because I agree. I like kind of seeing him on the bench, and while I don't think it's going to happen the entire season, just because, you know, I don't know. He's been the starter for.
That's that starting lineup. What are they like? I think when they're all together, they're like what 13-2 or something like that.
And the thing I think that's so valuable is the spacing element that Duncan Robinson brings to that starting lineup. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, Jaden Ivey is hitting like 31% from three. So I think that's going to, go up with the bigger sample size. But I think that the Pistons really could use spacing. I think they missed that a little bit in the last game where Duncan Robinson didn't play. And I also think Ivy will bring explosiveness to the bench with guys like, because I was really interested to see the lineup with Ivy, Karis LeVert played last game, and then Ron Holland, who had his career high game last game. So I really enjoyed seeing that lineup just because they had multiple ball handlers that were just explosive and that can get to the rim. So I honestly like Ivy coming off the bench a little better, especially to start the season. While I don't think it's going to happen, but I think that would be interesting to see, like, moving forward, if maybe they stagger the minutes with Cade and Ivy like they did in years past and have Ivy kind of playing with the bench unit more than Asar as that de facto point guard, so to say.
I like that. And this is the reason why. Look, Jaden Ivey is a starter in this league. Let's just call it what
Right.
it is. I mean, if he doesn't get hurt, we're not having this conversation. We'll probably be having another conversation on him and Cade being the best, backcourt in the league or something like that. But for me, at least, and it also goes into what Coach JB Bickerstaff has been preaching over these last couple of weeks, is how deep this team really is. And, this is a conversation that goes when you take a look at the rise of a Dennis Jenkins. You take a look at the production that Javonte Green has given. Even someone like you just mentioned, Ron Holland, who I believe in total steals right now, I believe he's like third or fourth in the league. So this team is very deep. However, I started getting the sense that I would like to see Jaden Ivey continue the season coming off the bench and kind of take on the role as this team six man, or kind of share that role with Karis LeVert during his second game of the season against the Indiana Pacers. And that game not only shows me how valuable it is to have someone like Jaden Ivey's talent coming off the bench, but it also shows me how valuable Jaden Ivey can be and will be to this team moving forward. Because if you go back and watch that game, I don't know if it was fatigue, I don't know if because the streak was really starting to get to the players or whatever, but that team did not look good in Indiana. And it's not just me that's saying it. Like, Coach JB Bickerstaff wasn't happy after the game, and this is a game that they won. Bickerstaff wasn't happy after the game. Cade is a very chill individual. But there are moments where you can tell, since I've been around for these 2 seasons, there are moments you can tell where Cade might be a little teed off. And even though that they won in Indy and extended the winning streak to 13, that was one of the few moments that I looked at Cade and talking to him during the post-game media availability, that I looked at Cade and I was like, oh, he's very teed off about something. And they were mad and upset at themselves because the way that game went, I think they was up by like 21 points. Indiana, went on this second half run and almost came back and won the game. But then, it took Cade's, fourth quarter heroics to keep, the winning streak going. But those guys knew that they did not play up to their standards, and they knew that game could go any way. And you're looking at an Indiana team. Look, even though they went to the NBA Finals a couple months ago, due to injuries and stuff, this season is just a loss for them. But when I go back and I take a look at that game, it was the moments where Jaden Ivey was on the court is part of the reason why, one of the main reasons why they won that game. And he only scored 12 points in their 138, 135 victory, but it was how he scored those 12 points. It was when he scored those 12 points. It's part of the reason why the Pistons were still able to win that game. You take away those 12 points, you take away Ivey's production, they don't win that game. And we having a whole nother different conversation about whether or not they frauds or not in the Eastern Conference. But when you go back and you watch that game and you look at, once again, how he scored, when he scored, the importance of the moments. And it wasn't just him scoring. It was the plays that he made on the defensive side of the ball. It was him making the assist or making the extra pass, in order to create a better opportunity, a better scoring opportunity for his teammates or whatever the case might be. That is what you want to see out of Jaden Ivey. And look, I get it, understand it. He's still not the guy that he was prior to the knee and the leg injury, but he is still one of the most talented young guards in this game. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to see him with this team, but not only that, part of the reason why I would like to continue seeing him coming off the bench, because if you have that one secret dynamic that you can just throw in at any given moment and it could change the dynamic and change everything of this team, you're looking at a situation where the Pistons can probably play late until May or early in June or whatever the case might be. Maybe a celebration downtown Detroit. Who knows? But that's when he is very important when you take a look at the dynamic in the core of this team. Jaden Ivey once again has played in 6 games. However, I think the game against the Indiana Pacers was his best game. However, Coach J.B. Bickerstaff thinks the victory that the Pistons were able to pull out in Miami on Saturday was his best game.
I mean, I think tonight was his best night. Again, when you haven't played professional basketball in 11 months, and you're on, about a 15-minute restriction, and you play smaller doses, it's not always going to be easy for a guy to come back. It's just hard. Playing NBA basketball is hard. Finding your rhythm, finding your confidence, all those things is hard. But I think tonight he showed what he's capable of, his ability to attack the paint, make shots, help us be a pest defensively. So he's only going to continue to get better, and it's just going to take him some time.
Really quick, that game against the Miami Heat, Jaden Ivey did have only 9 points, 2 assists, and 2 rebounds. However, just like what I said about the Indiana Pacers, I think that's what J.B. Bickerstaff was alluding to. It was when he scored those 9 points, when he got those rebounds, when he got those assists, when he made the extra, when he did the small details that does not show up on the score box. That is what made that game, in Coach J.B. Bickerstaff eyes, his most important game. Once again, 6 games for J.I. Tarohn. Did anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, one thing I thought was impressive about the Heat game was he had 4 free throws, so that just shows his aggressiveness. Because I think at times he can be a little hesitant. Like I see him, relying on that jumper. He did hit like almost 40% last season. It was kind of a small sample size since he didn't play the full season, but I like when Jaden Ivey is aggressive, trying to get to the line, trying to get those acrobatic layups, as we say, that just his explosive self that he's been showing like throughout his career. So I think that was something that was signs of, just good signs overall. And the other thing that makes this so impressive about Jaden Ivey's leadership is that we don't mention that he's on a contract year. So most players are on contract years. They kind of want to get there so that they can make sure that they get paid in the offseason and things like that. But just the fact that he's willing to come off the bench and willing to do what's best for the team right now just shows that he's above all that, and he'll worry about that later on.
On the other side of the break, we got to discuss, look, the Pistons, they got a major problem with these turnovers, man. And, it's getting to the point where it's like, come on, man, what are we doing? So we're going to talk about the turnovers in the Pistons and whether or not and how that could be a detriment to this team. The Detroit News Basketball Podcast, more of that on the other side of the break.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of the Detroit News Basketball Podcast. Coty M. Davis, Tarohn Finley here. Tarohn, one thing I love about Coach J.B. Bickerstaff is the fact that regardless of what is going on, he is one of the coaches that's always going to focus on how can he make his team better. Um, During the 13-game win streak, anytime, by the time we got to like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, the momentum was really starting to pick up and stuff. And people are looking at the Pistons more and more and more. And we were like, oh, y'all are first in here and second in here. JB Bickerstaff always talked about, what this team can do to improve upon and make sure that they're playing their best basketball come April, May, and potentially June. And they are 17-4. And right now at the top of JB Bickerstaff list, and rightfully so, is these turnovers. This team, and Tarohn, I'm gonna let you go first. But before I say this team, I don't understand when and how turnovers became a big issue. Now, let me preface my statement by saying this. Over the last 5.5 years, I know turnovers was really bad with this team. They always rank consistently at the bottom. But when you're a rebuilding team, you're trying to find your way, you're tanking for a prospect in France, you're going to be at the bottom. Last year, turnovers was a big issue. For the start of last season, turnovers was a big issue, but it's because, everybody was trying to find their groove in the new system and stuff. And after the All-Star break, this team finally stopped turning the ball over. You look at that 13-game winning streak that they had. You look at the start of the season that they had. Turnovers look really – they look good taking care of the ball. However, over the last 3 games, this team is ranked dead last. Over the last 3 games, this team has averaged 22.7 turnovers per game. Ron, my brother, before I lose my cool, what have you seen from this team when it comes to these turnovers?
Yeah, I think I've seen like the last 3 games, last 4 games that they rank, like you said, dead last in turnovers. I know the Magic
2.7.
So that's crazy. I did not realize it was that bad. Like I knew the Magic game they had 24 turnovers, and before then, like now with the Magic game and all the stats, they ranked 26 in turnovers overall with 16 a game. And I just think that shows I don't want to say I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it, but sometimes they can be really sloppy. And I think that leads to those slow starts that we talked about throughout this podcast in the first quarter, the first half, sometimes the first 3 quarters before, like you said, Cade puts on his Superman cape and wills the team out to a win like he did against the Hawks the last game they played. But I think that also shows that once teams double Cade, the other playmakers on the team really have to step up. That's why we were talking about that Jaden Ivey could really be beneficial once he gets into full health off the bench, because just the fact that he brings that playmaking element along with guys like Karis LeVert and others, I think they're really going to be relied on just because there has been some sloppiness and some carelessness, especially early on in the game. But I'm a little concerned about that as well as the half-court offense. But, Coty, just get it off your chest. Tell me how you feel about these turnovers you've been seeing lately.
Most of these turnovers, and look, I get your point about Cade. I get your point about, when they double him, that could really, mess up the flow of the offense. And it has. And that's something that, I've been talking about. Not just me. Everyone has been talking about, let's say, over these last 2 seasons. However, but for me, man, it's just the carelessness with the ball. And the one that really stands out to me was this last game that they had against the Atlanta Hawks. They had it's the 3rd time that they committed over 20 turnovers. They finished the game with 22. Over these last 3 games, the worst game that they had was 24, and that was the game that you alluded to is against the Orlando Magic. But my thing is this. There were so many times where it was just mental mistakes when I'm like, bro, what are you doing? There was a moment where it was a 2-on-1 fast break. Tobias Harris understands and should know that he's not the best lob passer. I understand you have Asar Thompson to your left. If you know that you're not the best lob passer and it's 2 against 1, why not just give a simple bounce pass, a simple chest pass, fundamental style, and make sure that Asar can do whatever he needs to do. We know how acrobatic he is to make sure that the Pistons get that basket in transition. And it's not just that. There were so many like just boneheaded mistakes that the Pistons were making. Once again, they finished that game with 22 turnovers, but I could count at least 7 that could have been avoided. The one against that I just mentioned about Tobias Harris, that was one. There was one where JD was in a post. I don't know if he thought he was Kareem or Hakeem or somebody, and he trying to do some move, 3-second violation. The one that really, I'm not gonna say frustrated me the most, but the one that I was like, okay, what are we doing? Started the third quarter. K literally just, there's no crossover, there's no behind the back, there's no shake and bake or nothing. Cage just casually takes one dribble, bounce off his right foot, goes out of bounds, turnover. And I'm just like, what are they doing? I don't understand. And JB talked about this as well. There are certain turnovers that you can live with, especially when you are being aggressive. Especially when you have a lineup out there where, let's say, Cade or Dennis Jenkins, we got to throw him in there now, where you only have, let's say, one true ball handler out there, Jaden Ivey or whatever the case might be. There are turnovers that you can live with, but there are multiple turnovers where you got to say, guys, y'all got to get your head in the game or something, because if this issue continue, then we're not going to be sitting here talking about this team with the possibility of playing in June or playing in late to mid-May. We're going to sit in here talking about the Pistons got eliminated in the first round again. Was this year a disappointment? Like, that can literally be a detriment to this team. And look, that's something that all the players and coaches have talked about. The one thing that I love about Jalen Duren, when we talked to him after the game, I couldn't play it because he dropped a curse word here and there. Mm-hmm. But he took accountability for not only himself but for the team, because he was like, look, we just got to take care of the ball, plain and simple. And not only do we got to take care of the ball, we got to stop trying to make the highlight passes or the winning plays or whatever the case might be. He was like, we just have to calm down and make the correct pass and correct play at that time and moment, and then we could start seeing their turnovers go down.
Right. And Coty, I'm just so interested to watch this stretch before the trade deadline, because we seen last year they acquired Dennis Schroeder.
That's a good point.
The fact that Dennis Jenkins has been playing so well that, at points I'm like, maybe they don't need to do something like that, trade away draft capital or one of their players to go get someone. But it's just going to be interesting to watch. Just, do they need a backup point guard officially? Because Dennis is more of a combo guard. He still is on his two-way. And then they have Ivy, LeVert, even Asar playing point guard roles, even though that's not their official position. Chris Paul did just get released yesterday, so maybe they picked up Blake Griffin a few years ago. I don't like trade rumors or rumors in general, but that is something interesting that I wouldn't be opposed to at this point in his career. He wants to go out with a bang. He did say this is his last season, so I wouldn't mind the Pistons, thinking about adding someone like that, a veteran that can get the second unit really going and is known for their passing, so to say. So that's something I just kind of thought about when you were talking and venting about the turnovers, even though he hasn't played as well. But that is something I'm going to watch to see if the Pistons are aggressive in finding a backup point guard or something like that, or do they just roll with the team they have?
We'll see. I know the one thing that I do know about this front office, that I do know about Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff, is the fact that they're definitely going to make sure that they give this team enough time to see, if they can fix their, own mistakes. And not only can they fix their own mistakes, how far can they truly believe that they can go? That's part of the reason why you saw them go out there and get someone like Dennis last season, was because, this team got to the point that it was like, look, we need to fix this issue in order for us to go and make the playoffs. And that's exactly what we saw. And now, look, playoffs is no longer the bar. It's like, okay, I think the bar as of right now, you got to get out the first round. The way this team has started the season, the way how good everybody has looked, you're looking at a situation where look, it's either you got to get to at least the second round in order to say that this season was a success. And in order for them to do that, they definitely got to find a way to fix these turnovers. And this is why I say I don't understand what has been going on over these last 3 games, because over the last 3 games is basically the healthiest this team has been. Once again, 22.7 turnovers, dead last in the league. I forgot which team which is the closest to them, and I think the second most turnovers in this 3 game span, I believe, are the New Orleans Pelicans, if I'm not mistaken, or the Washington Wizards, and they're at like 17, which is a little bit below the league average. So I don't understand what has transpired. Maybe they're still trying to figure out the continuity piece, because you're starting to add guys more into the lineup or whatever the case might be. Maybe that can be an issue. But here's the thing, and this is why I say I don't understand it. During that 13-game winning streak, a winning streak in which you won, let's say 4, maybe 5 games with 4 of your 5 starters out, people going in and out the lineup. This team was 12th in the league in turnovers at 14 in a half. That's why I say it doesn't make sense. So look, they got to fix that turnover issue. Like I mentioned, we'll be on this podcast come April, early May, saying what in the world happened. So, Tarohn, any last thoughts, my brother?
Yeah, I think you really took it away. Like, that really just makes a lot of sense. Like, where is this jump coming from? But you did make me think about, like you said, this is the healthiest they've been. So maybe it's guys, like you said, trying to figure out their roles and things like that. And they're, I think, sometimes still trying to figure out like the half court offense in general with just all these guys. So that is something I'm going to be watching to see these next few games against the Bucks and things like that. Do they, kind of try to figure things out, especially now that they got, knocked out the in-season tournament and the NBA Cup, things like that. So I think this really is going to be something to watch, like moving forward, not just the record, but how efficient they look.
With that being said, that's going to conclude another installment of the Detroit News Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor. As always, I'm your host, Coty M. Davis, Pistons beat writer at the Detroit News. Please remember to follow me on all your social media platforms at Coty Davis _24. Once again, it's Coty, COTY DAVIS _24.
And I'm Tarohn Finley. Make sure you guys follow me on all social media platforms at TAROHNFINLEY. Once again, TAROHNFINLEY. That was good, Coty.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.